Welcome back to Precise News.
Let's have a quick recap on last month's news. According to NBC, the Biden administration is discussing stopping or slowing arms shipments to Israel to pressure it with the aim of reducing the military operation. But this is false information released before the storm. These days, Biden is massively arming Israel with all kinds of weapons: F-16, F-35 fighter jets and Apache helicopters, preparing Israel for war with Hezbollah. Such false information that is now being released by the U.S. government is part of the psychological war, to show the public that the U.S. is against it. But Israel is going to fight and attack Lebanon on its own. Pray for Lebanon.
In the past 2 days, the U.S. has sent multiple messages to Tehran via a third country, Al Jazeera. The U.S. and Iran are constantly in communication these days, practically informing each other of what will be bombed and what will not. Iran has sent a message to the U.S. via a third party. Iran has warned the U.S. that the slightest attack on Iranian soil, with or without human casualties, will be met with retaliatory strikes on U.S. forces in the Middle East. The U.S. sent more than one message to Tehran over the past 2 days via third parties. Washington's messages said that it did not want an open war and warned that expanding the war would be met with the U.S. action. Tehran rejected Washington's threats and said targeting its territory is a red line, and crossing the line would be met with an appropriate response. Tehran's message said that it does not want a war with Washington either, but it will forcefully confront any American adventure. Iran has told the U.S. via intermediaries that if it strikes Iranian soil directly, Tehran will itself hit back at American assets in the Middle East, drawing the two sides into a direct conflict. U.S. plans to target Iranian assets outside of Iran, but Biden can't convince Iran not to retaliate. U.S. military action against Iran could come in the form of a campaign that could last weeks, which would see the targeting of Iran-backed militias in airstrikes across Syria and Iraq, as well as strikes on Iranian assets outside of Iran, according to NBC News. Yesterday, the media reported that the Pentagon informed Iran through Switzerland that they would target Iranian assets, asking Iran not to retaliate. Iran naturally said it would retaliate. The media also reported that Biden is on the fence about whether or not to go to war with Iran. The CIA Director William Burns yesterday in an article for Foreign Affairs wrote that the only way to protect Israel is dealing with Iran. Foreign Minister of Iran, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, said, "The Iranian response to American threats will be decisive and direct. A war between U.S. and Iran is on the brink. The U.S. has decided to target Iran's assets and military personnel." U.S. officials have confirmed to CBS News that plans have been approved for a series of strikes over a number of days against targets, including Iranian personnel and facilities, inside Iraq and Syria. Statement by U.S. President Joe Biden. "This afternoon, at my direction, U.S. military forces struck targets facilities in Iraq and Syria that the IRGC and affiliated militia used to attack U.S. forces." Iraqi Armed Forces statement on U.S. strikes. The cities of Al-Qaim and the Iraqi border areas are subjected to airstrikes by United States aircraft. These strikes come at a time when Iraq is striving to ensure the stability of the region. These strikes constitute a violation of Iraqi sovereignty and undermine the efforts of the Iraqi government, posing a threat that will pull Iraq and the region to undesirable consequences, with severe implications for security and stability in Iraq and the region. The U.S. is now directly bombing Yemen, Syria and Iraq in the Middle East. U.S. National Security Advisor to NBC. "We do not accept the claim that what is happening in the Red Sea is linked to the war in Gaza. What is happening in the Red Sea is 200% related to the genocide in Gaza." The Houthis closed this passage only to Israeli ships and ships moving towards Israel. All other ships could pass freely. The US and the UK entered the conflict only to defend Israel and to prevent the Houthis from harming them financially while Israel carries out the genocide in Gaza. After the US and the UK entered into conflict with the Houthis, due to the escalation of the situation, now all transport here has been stopped. The ships have to bypass Africa and thus drastically increase the prices of the goods they carry, causing increased inflation in Europe. The U.S. and the Iraqi military are facing a direct clash. The U.S. has targeted members of the Iraqi army in Baghdad. Calls for U.S. Embassy seizures. Several explosions are heard in Baghdad. According to reports, the U.S. is targeting members of the Popular Mobilization Forces, which are part of the Iraqi armed forces. Iraqi resistance-affiliated groups are calling on supporters to storm the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. All roads and checkpoints leading to the Green Zone in Baghdad have been closed. Abu Bakr al-Sadi and Arkan al-Alawi, two senior leaders in the Iranian-backed militia Kataib Hezbollah, were killed in the U.S. attack. In eastern Baghdad, trouble in paradise. Huge protest in Tel Aviv demanding Netanyahu's resignation and hostage deal. Netanyahu avoids making an agreement and is preparing for an invasion of Rafah, where there are 1.2 million refugees. The actions of the Israeli military have already led to the death of dozens of hostages. Brazilian President Lula da Silva. What Israel is doing in Gaza is equivalent to what Hitler did to the Jews. The Israeli War Cabinet had made the decision to enter Rafah. The invasion will happen as the month of Ramadan approaches, according to Israeli media. Netanyahu answered to Brazilian President Lula. The words of the President of Brazil are shameful and serious. This is about trivializing the Holocaust and trying to harm the Jewish people and Israel's right to defend itself. Comparing Israel to the Nazi Holocaust and Hitler is crossing a red line. Israel fights for its defense and securing its future until complete victory, and it does so while upholding international law. I decided with Foreign Minister Israel Katz to summon the Brazilian ambassador to Israel for a stern reprimand conversation immediately. Almost 20% decline of the Israeli economy. The Israeli economy contracted by 19.4% in the last quarter Q4 of 2023, due to the war on Gaza. The first objective of the Palestinian resistance is being fulfilled. Massive reduction of Israel's economy and industrial potential. The U.S. wants to cover this hole with a $14 billion new aid package as part of the big $95 billion that has not yet passed the Senate. The economy plummeted nearly 90% more than earlier estimated by Bloomberg of a 10.5% contraction. The $500 billion economy contracted an annual 19.4% in the fourth quarter from the previous 3 months, the Central Bureau of Statistics said in an initial estimate of gross domestic product that was double the rate expected in a Reuters consensus. Still, 2023 as a whole ended with positive growth considering that the war in 2023 lasted less than 3 months. Israelis sharply curtailed spending, traveling and investing at the end of 2023 as Israel's all-out war on Gaza exacted a heavy toll on the economy. Data released on Monday showed the war had stopped economic growth in its tracks, especially with a massive call-up of reserves and tens of thousands displaced from border towns near Gaza and Lebanon due to constant rocket attacks from Hamas and Hezbollah. A visual of Israel's ethnic cleansing of the people of Gaza since October 7. The people have been forced to go south to the Rafah border crossing. Now Israel wants to attack the last refugee camp full of children and women. The only goal is to drive 2.5 million people into Egypt and completes the ethnic cleansing. In today's news, a terrifying footage shows Ukrainians striking a group of Russian soldiers in training. Russia has a lot of intelligent commanders, but it definitely has a huge number of morons. The same mistake is made over and over again. They group soldiers close to the front. Incredibly stupid and arrogant. On the other hand, tonight, Israel bombed refugee camps in Rafah and central Gaza again. Many dead and injured children. This comes at the same time as members of Netanyahu's government and party in parliament have been using Nazi language to call for the killing of everyone, including women and children in Gaza. Video of Israeli bombing of refugee camps next to the fence with Egypt. The displaced people set up their tents next to the Egyptian border in Rafah, south of the Gaza Strip, thinking that they would be safe in front of the eyes of the Egyptian armed forces. But the Israelis bombed the displaced people and bombed the Egyptian border in front of the eyes of the Egyptian armed forces. The Egyptian forces only watched cowardly and did not lift a finger. Creator of Israel, Lord Jacob Rothschild, passed away at age 87. Lord Jacob's passing reminds us of the key role the Rothschilds played in Israel's creation and growth. Jacob's great-uncle Walter was directly addressed in the historic Balfour Declaration that supported a Jewish state. Walter Rothschild's friendship with Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann, highlights the family's significant influence in early Zionist efforts. Via Middle East Spectator, the Jordanian army drops help from the sky, due to Israel's blockade of the trucks. Thousands of Palestinians are flocking to the shores of Gaza in an attempt to recover aid packages dropped by the Jordanian army, which carried out multiple airdrops of food along the coastal areas. Mass starvation of the population is currently taking place by Israel following the example of the Holocaust of the Second World War. The Israeli army and civilians block the trucks at the fence in order to starve the population of Gaza. Hunger has already claimed several children's lives. More and more veterans in the U.S. are raising their voices against the Israeli genocide and the brutal massacre of children. Alan Shabara, a U.S. veteran with a powerful message.
I did 3 rotations, 2008, 2009, and 2007. I know war. What's going on in Palestine right now is not a war. It is the dehumanization, it's the genocide, it's the ethnic cleansing of a specific people to take their land. This is wrong, and there's nothing more American than speaking out against what's wrong. The U.S. taxpayer is paying for this, which makes it even more frustrating. This needs to stop.
Putin warns the West. We also have weapons that can hit your territory. President Vladimir Putin warned the West on Thursday that Russia had weapons that could strike within their territory and that their threats created a real risk of nuclear war. They should eventually realize that we also have weapons that can hit targets on their territory. Everything that the West comes up with creates the real threat of a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons, and thus the destruction of civilization, Putin said at his annual State of the Nation address. Humanitarian aid massacre happened in Gaza today. Hungry Palestinians gathered waiting for food aid. Israel shot them. This wasn't aerial bombardment. This was a ground-level assassination. 104 innocent civilians were killed. Colombia has suspended all shipments to and from Israel. It was previously receiving weapons from Israel. Colombian President Gustavo Petro says, the whole world should blockade Netanyahu. Flour bags in Gaza covered in Palestinian blood after the Israeli massacre against starved civilians. Germany planned a Crimea attack. German military officials reportedly planned to attack Russia's Crimea bridge, aiming for strategic and political impact, stressing non-direct involvement. The target is not only of military strategic importance, but also political good. We can't be seen as directly involved. Russia replied. This is a complete shame and loss of face for Germany, showing its new colors. Deceitful, vile, aggressive, revanchist and Russophobic. Germany is no longer the country with which Russia signed friendship treaties in the 1990s and 2000s. Analogy with the 1930s is inevitable. Germany needs to watch what it does because the next time Russia goes in, it will never come out again.